Sign the damn check, Stanton, please. A name that would be really interesting would be he's won a few gold gloves, a couple platinum gloves. Here is the way too early lineup for 2024. This lineup is not happening. If it did happen, that would be amazing, but this is not happening. If it did happen, they would be in the playoffs. But again, this is not happening. All right, it is now that time of the year to where we are overly optimistic about what the Mariners will actually do this coming offseason. So today I'm going to get into the Mariners offseason preview, go through the 2023 end of year roster, talk through the players' contracts, who's going to be leaving this offseason for sure through free agency, who's going to be here at the start of 2024 on the Mariners active roster, and then get into some various free agents that the Mariners might be able to acquire, and then also look at a couple players that they might be able to acquire via trade. And if this year's offseason preview is anything like last year's, then I'll be about 54% accurate. Last year, I thought that the Mariners were going to go get Brandon Nimmo and Dansby Swanson. Clearly, I didn't use the Jerry Dipoto factor, as of course he went and got Colton Wong via trade, as well as some various other players that we didn't really have on the radar. So with that, let's get into the Mariners offseason preview. Starting with the 2023 end-of-year lineup, this is what the Mariners were rolling with their last few games of the season. Starting out at leadoff, shortstop JP Crawford had his best offensive production year of his career. He actually tied Julio Rodriguez with OPS, on base plus slugging, with an 818 OPS. The difference between JP and Julio's OPS, it was quite a bit different with how they came about getting that number. With JP Crawford, it was largely due to his on-base percentage. He was walking at nearly a 15% rate. Julio Rodriguez got to that OPS with a little higher batting average than JP, and then also his slugging was much higher than JP's. But JP had a very promising year this last year. He went to Driveline Baseball this last offseason. Rumors are that JP is going to be bringing Ty France to Driveline Baseball this offseason, as well as potentially some other players. Those other players, I'm not sure who, but if we can get Ty France back to where he was in 2022, then that would provide some much needed support and depth in this lineup. Batting second, of course, was Julio in center field. Batting third was Eugenio Suarez. 4 was Teoscar Hernandez. 5 was switch hitting Cal Raleigh, who led all MLB catchers in home runs. 6 was Mike Ford at DH. 7th was Ty France at first base. Jared Kelenic made a return after kicking that cooler. He was batting 8th. And then Josh Rojas was ending it out, rounding out the lineup at 9. And then for the bench at the end of the year, he's starting off with Dominic Canzone. He was playing the outfield a lot before Kelenic came back from the injured list. I also saw him taking quite a few ground balls at first base. That might be a position to where if he can slot in at first base sometimes, depending on Ty France's production next year, if he bounces back or if he stays, down at the plate like he was this year. If you could have Canzone at first base, also depending on who you get this offseason, if you get some outfielders instead of Canzone playing out there, have some flexibility in the infield, that could definitely help. Then you got Sam Haggerty, switch hitter, utility guy, super utility, Dylan Moore, and then also Jose Caballero, who plays mainly the infield. I think we saw him in the outfield a couple times last year. As for the depth chart of the starting pitchers, you have Luis Castillo, who's a free agent either in 2028 or 29. You got Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, both free agents in 2028. You got Bryce Miller and Brian Wu, both free agents are in around 29. Then you got Robbie Ray, that's coming off of an injury this year. We expect to see him, I believe, at some point in July or August. You also got Marco Gonzalez, that was down for the year. He'll be back at some point in 24. And then you got Emerson Hancock, that was injured as well. I assume that we'll see him at some point in 24 too. And with those last few guys, Robbie Ray has an opt-out after 2025. And then also Marco Gonzalez is likely only going to be under contract through 2025. Emerson Hancock until around 2029. As for relief pitchers, this is one of the Mariners' specialties, the ability to be able to go out and find essentially no-name pitchers that come in, they tweak some things, tell the pitcher, hey, this is what your strong suit is, throw this pitch in this area, and you throw it often, and they find success. So a lot of these guys weren't even known of heading into the offseason last year. They picked up Justin Topa, Gabe Spire, Taylor Saucedo. They got Trent Thornton last year later on. Isaiah Campbell came up through their system. Prelander Burrow has come up through their system. And when you look at the bullpen from last year, they really went closer by committee after Paul Sewald was traded into the Diamondbacks. And Scott Service has always kind of used that closer by committee. He'll use Andres Munoz typically against the heart of the order, no matter which inning that comes in, 7th, 8th, or 9th. Justin Topa was huge last year with how good he was in late situations and high pressure situations. And Matt Brash was probably the best relief pitcher that the Mariners had as far as a total value wise. So Andres Munoz, he can become a free agent around 2026. There are a few club options that they'll likely pick up to keep him under contract until 2029. Matt Brash becomes a free agent around 2028. Justin Topa 2027. Gabe Spire, Taylor Saucedo, both 2028. Trent Thornton, 2026. Isaiah Campbell and Prelander Baroa, both in 2029. You can say a lot of things about the Mariners roster and whatever your opinion is on that, but something that's great to point out is that they have a lot of these guys under contract for the foreseeable future, really the long term. And like I said in the 54% video, they need to be going for the World Series every year the next 5 years. And the fact that they have all these guys under contract for that entire span is great to see. The only relief pitcher that they'll be losing this offseason is Dominic Leone, who they acquired at the waiver deadline, I believe. Now getting into some position players with free agency, Cal Raleigh's under contract until around 2028. Luis Torrens is under contract until 2026. And then Tom Murphy is technically going to be a free agent, but we've heard speculation throughout this year that they'll sign him to an extension. I do think that they'll sign Tom Murphy to an extension for a couple or a few years. He's been great in backing up Cal Raleigh, and he's just a quality hitter when he has his at-bats. Believe it or not, in 2023, Tom Murphy bat .290 with an .873 OPS, which is an OPS plus of 142, so his bat was about 42% above league average through his 159 plate appearances. And it really didn't matter versus righties or lefties. He actually had a slightly higher OPS against righties, so the Mariners should definitely try to keep him around. The Mariners have a top catching prospect coming up through their system. I'm not sure when exactly we'll see him. I think it might be at some point next year, to be honest. But I think Harry Ford can make a contribution at some point next year. So depending on when they see him making an impact at the big league level, that's probably around how long we'll see Tom Murphy. As for the infield, Eugenio Suarez becomes a free agent in 2025. So after next season, there is a club option for 1 more year. But realistically, I think the Mariners will roll with Gino for 1 more year. And then we'll see where they decide to go at third base. JP Crawford becomes a free agent in 2027, Ty France in 26. Josh Rojas, who was a part of that trade last year, becomes a free agent in 2027. Caballero 2028. And then Mike Ford, Dylan Moore, and Sam Haggerty all 2027. Dominic Canzone would be around 2028. I also have Dominic Canzone listed in the outfield for obvious reasons. You got Julio Rodriguez on that infinite contract, essentially. You got Jared Kelenic, who's going to be a free agent in 2028. Canzone and Haggerty again. And then Teoscar Hernandez is a free agent this offseason. He ain't coming back. Teoscar was a bit disappointing last year for a lot of the year. He had a really hot stretch towards the middle or late end of the season. But the Mariners have to start moving out of a system to where they're based solely around strikeouts, walks, and home runs. They had 3 guys in the top 8 in all of baseball for strikeouts. Eugenio Suarez had 214 strikeouts, Teoscar Hernandez had 211 strikeouts, and then Julio Rodriguez was 8th in baseball in total strikeouts. So that will be one of the voids that we'll see where they fill. For designated hitter, you saw Mike Ford and Cal Raleigh in those spots, along with Teoscar Hernandez and Tom Murphy. Again, Teo and Tom are currently free agents. So in total, there's only 3 free agents heading into this year: Dominic Leone, Teoscar Hernandez, and Tom Murphy. And then here's a 2024 roster, assuming all of those free agents leave. Essentially, you have all of the same guys. You just are without Teo and without Tom Murphy. The 2024 roster locks, these are just my opinion. You got Castillo, Gilbert, and Kirby, which are absolute locks. And you got Miller and Wu, assuming that they're still here. We'll see if they're traded this offseason for some young, controllable position players. The locks for the bullpen, in my opinion, are Munoz, Brash, Topa, Spire, and Baroa. Munoz, Brash, and Topa were the 3 lockdown guys from last year. Spire was also really solid. We only saw a small bit of Baroa, but I think we'll see a lot of him this next year. Also some other locks: Cal Raleigh at catcher, of course. As for first base, I'm starting to wonder if Ty France is actually a lock. That's why I have the ... At second base, you've got Josh Rojas, and the Mariners front office has made it clear, for better or worse, that they're going to be moving forward with Josh Rojas as their starting everyday second baseman. At third base, you got Gino. Shortstop, you got JP. In the outfield, the locks are going to be Julio, Kelenic, and Canzone. At DH, we'll see if they roll with Ford again. He hits some nukes, but we'll see if they decide to upgrade that position through free agency. And then at the utility spot, we have Dylan Moore. I don't have Sam Haggerty on here. We'll see where he is moving forward. So this is where I see the potential holes that the Mariners have to fill. They have to get someone who can just get on base. They have to get someone who can just make contact. Ideally, they can get someone who has a bat in their hands. And then that last hole is to get a starting pitcher, since a young starting pitcher will be traded this offseason. Now, of course, those first 3 holes that I mentioned, of course, I'm joking around a bit, but they really need to get someone that can just make contact. They need to get 1 or 2 solid batting average guys. It's great to have guys that have a high on-base percentage and that can draw a walk, but they really need 1 or 2 consistent contact hitters, guys that don't strike out a ton, guys that put the ball in play. And it's great when you have guys that can draw walks, but if a pitcher is pounding the strike zone and, for example, late innings, you got to be able to have a guy that can come up to the plate and be able to put the ball in play, be able to get a base hit when it's really needed. Now, getting into some of the top free agents that are available in this year's class. The class is not as strong as it was last year from a bats perspective, but of course, the #1 bat on the market for 2024 is going to be Shohei Ohtani. He got Tommy John surgery late this last year, so he won't be pitching in 2024, but he will be hitting. Shohei Ohtani is obviously a no-brainer target. You also have Cody Bellinger, who's the next best bat. You got Matt Chapman. Rhys Hoskins is another big guy. He tore his ACL in spring training, and I put maybe we could sign him to a 1-year deal with the club option, but it's highly unrealistic that we would get Rhys Hoskins. I don't have him in any of my scenarios. He just happens to be another big name that's going to be a free agent. As for the arms, the starting pitchers, this is where it gets really interesting. There's a pretty deep starting pitcher class in free agency this offseason as well. Now, we'll get into a lot of those names, but some of the top arms are Sonny Gray, Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, and Aaron Nola. Now, the pitchers' wins above replacement are via Fangraphs versus the batters are through Baseball Reference. The difference between those two calculations with wins above replacement are more so because Fangraphs uses more so FIP for pitchers, which is fielding independent pitching, meaning that it's only looking at the things that a pitcher can control on the mound in strikeouts, walks, hit batters, without factoring in the defense. So, for example, Blake Snell's Fangraphs wins above replacement are 4.1 versus his Baseball Reference is 6. And Blake Snell is a higher value in Baseball Reference than Sonny Gray and Jordan Montgomery, but Fangraphs he's third because he tends to walk more batters. Some of the top first base / DH options are Rhys Hoskins. Again, I don't think he would sign in Seattle. You also have Max Muncy and Josh Bell, both of which I don't think are a great fit for the Mariners. Low batting average, not a great strikeout rate. A name that would be really interesting would be Matt Chapman. He's won a few Gold Gloves, a couple Platinum Gloves. You have Eugenio Suarez for essentially 1 more year. So do the Mariners go out and get a guy like Matt Chapman for their long-term replacement at third base? Or are they planning for someone in their system to come and produce pretty quickly after this next year? I think it'd be really intriguing if they went out and got Matt Chapman this year. You have Chapman and Geno split time at DH at their base. And what's really surprising is that Geno Smith this year had a higher fielding value than Matt Chapman. Geno played some amazing third base this year, might even be a Gold Glove. Some of the top free agents for the outfield, the Mariners should definitely pursue basically all of these guys, but Cody Bellinger is coming off of a 4.4 wins above replacement year. Kevin Kiermaier is second. A lot of his value is from defense. Some other solid guys are Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Mark Canha. Teoscar Hernandez isn't coming back. JD Martinez is basically a DH at this point. Then you got Jorge Soler, who's a really interesting name. And then you got Tommy Pham, who's also a free agent. The top starting pitcher free agents available, again, Sonny Gray, Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, Aaron Nola. Then you have a bit of a drop-off, and then you have Eduardo Rodriguez, Uncle Charlie Morton. He's getting up there in age, but he's still producing some quality years. Then you got Michael Wacha, of course, Shohei Ohtani. Clayton Kershaw's either going to stay a Dodger or he's going to retire. Then you got Jack Flaherty, Michael Lorenzen, Kenta Maeda, Lucas Giolito, and Big Maple, James Paxton. All of those last few guys would be back end of the rotation type guy. Top free agents available for relief pitchers are Aroldis Chapman. He's 35, but age is just a number. And also another number with him is 102, which is what he's throwing basically every night. Then just below him is Josh Hader. Jordan Hicks is after him. I think it would be a lot of fun to see Jordan Hicks in a Mariners uniform, pumping 102-mile-an-hour sinkers. Then you got Craig Kimbrell, Reynaldo Lopez, Matt Moore. And an interesting name, although he just had a .1 wins above replacement year, is Trevor May, who currently was with Oakland, but he's a Seattle guy. Some of the top free agents for the Mariners that they absolutely need to go target are, of course, Shohei Ohtani. Sign the damn check, Stanton, please. Shohei Ohtani will pay for himself no matter where he goes in all of 5 minutes. Jerseys would be sold out immediately. The stadium would be packed every single weekend. He is only hitting next year, but he will be pitching again starting in 2025. Players 1 through 5 that you should be targeting are Shohei Ohtani. Blake Snell is a perfect fit for the Mariners. He's a Seattle native. He talks about it all the time about how much he loves Seattle. It's a pitcher's ballpark. He's coming off of what is soon to be his second Cy Young season. The thing with him is that he doesn't always pitch super deep into games. He throws a lot of pitches. He strikes out a lot of guys. He also walks a lot of guys. But he's a guy you add to your rotation. If you have Luis Castillo, Blake Snell, 1-2, and then you have Gilbert, and then you have Kirby, the Mariners had a top 3 pitching rotation this past year. This would just amplify that. Now, if the Mariners aren't able to get Blake Snell for whatever reason, I do think it is realistic to go get Blake Snell. Then you should definitely target Sonny Gray or Aaron Nola, potentially Jordan Montgomery. Another target, I think, is Chapman as a long-term third base. Or if they're going to be prepping for a minor leaguer at third base, I'm not sure. Now, the top moves that they might make outside of free agents would be trading Brian Wu and or Bryce Miller or Emerson Hancock, one of those combinations, for young bats. Now, more than likely, it'll be completely out of left field. All of these mock trades that you see are great. You know, for example, the Logan Gilbert trade to the Cardinals last year, you see all these names. It's most likely going to be something that we don't see coming. As I mentioned, this past year, there was rumors that Gilbert was going to be traded to the Cardinals for some of their young prospects. And that third bullet point, with the challenge of the Mariners getting free agent batters in the offseason, whether it's true or not with the Marine layer, I feel like it's more of a mindset to where people feel like they're going into a non-hitters friendly ballpark, and because of that, and just because of that mindset, they underperform, not necessarily because of the actual conditions, because then you have the opposing teams coming into the ballpark and they have no issue. So I just don't know. But with that issue that is there, the Mariners need to keep continuing to sign top pitchers. Sign the guy like Blake Snell or Sonny Gray, because those guys are more inclined to sign in Seattle than a hitter. You then trade some of your depth in starting young pitching for the area that is tough to sign in free agency, which is the bats. And then one other option is maybe Brent Rooker. Brent Rooker is mainly on here because he was tweeting this last week. One is that Matt Brash's slider is the hardest pitch that he's seen. And he also stated that his favorite visiting ballpark is T-Mobile in Seattle. So you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You won't have to face Matt Brash, and you could play all of your home games in Seattle. And if you look at Brent Rooker's numbers, I mean, yeah, his strikeout percentage is bad, his whiff rate is bad, but he hits the ball really hard. This is more of an outside type trade. He was the A's all-star this past year. So with all that in mind, again, the potential holes to fill, mainly those top 3 holes, are really just combining one person, just someone who can make contact and get on base, and then to get a starting pitcher, since the young starting pitcher will be traded. Here is the way too early lineup for 2024. This lineup is not happening. If it did happen, that would be amazing, but this is not happening. If it did happen, they would be in the playoffs. But again, this is not happening. J.P. Crawford leading off, Julio Rodriguez 2, Shohei Ohtani 3rd, Cody Bellinger in the cleanup spot, Cal Raleigh, Eugenio Suarez, Jared Kelenic, Ty France, and Josh Rojas. If the Mariners were able to sign Ohtani, they're not going to get also the top outfield free agent as well in Cody Bellinger. That's not going to happen. But if they were to sign a bat, I do think a lefty would have better luck in Seattle. Another lineup that's a bit more realistic if they got Ohtani would be to get Mark Canha instead of Cody Bellinger. Mark Canha is a solid contact guy. He had a 262 average, a 355 on base, and a 755 OPS. He's not hitting the ball all that hard, but his chase rate is in the 78th percentile. His whiff rate's in the 86th percentile. His strikeout percentile is the 87th, walks the 65th. The Mariners passed on him this past offseason, but they have another shot at getting Mark Canha, who can make a solid impact on this lineup. Now, a lineup, if they weren't able to get Ohtani, I added in Lourdes Gurriel Jr. as well as Jorge Soler at the DH. So instead of Ohtani, they were able to get Jorge Soler at DH, and then one of Lourdes Gurriel Jr. or Mark Canha to play left field. Lourdes Gurriel this past year batted .261 with the 772 OPS. He hits the ball harder than Canha. He also has a solid whiff percentage and K percentage, and he could also play a quality outfield for you. Jorge Soler, a slightly lower batting average at .250, although he OPS'd 853 last year. And Jorge Soler is just one of those guys, you tell him to bat clean up for you, go hit his 30 bombs, and he would have a huge impact on your lineup. He hits the ball really hard. He has a solid chase percentage and also a solid walk percentage. So in this scenario, you have J.P. Crawford, then Julio, then Lourdes or Mark Canha, then Jorge Soler in the cleanup, Cal Raleigh, Gino Suarez, Jared Kelenic, Ty France, and then Josh Rojas. Then one potential lineup, if the Mariners were to make a trade with the Cardinals, let's say a young starting pitcher or two, in exchange for, in this scenario, Paul Goldschmidt and Tommy Edman, as well as, potentially some prospects changed back and forth. Mason Wynn is one of their top prospects that was a middle infielder. You could swap him out for Tommy Edman. And again, the pieces moving around would vary in those different scenarios. But if you were able to have JP Crawford, then Julio, then Paul Goldschmidt, Gino Suarez, Cal Raleigh, Jared Kelenic, Tommy Edman, Ty France, and Josh Rojas, that would be a solid lineup as well. Paul Goldschmidt you would have for 1 year. Tommy Edman you would have for 2 years. That's where this trade in specific isn't a very long-term forward-looking trade, unless you're able to get some prospects back like a Mason Wynn or Jordan Walker, that type of thing. Now, the way too early 2024 lineup, this would be ideal for the bench. If Dominic Canzone is coming off of the bench, then that's a good thing. That means that you went out and got some quality free agents or some quality just bats that are above Canzone. I'm curious to see when Ryan Bliss will make an impact for the Mariners. He's been tearing up the minor leagues as Canzone was as well. Ryan Bliss in 2023 was batting .304 with a .902 OPS. That's across AA and AAA. Canzone had some even crazier numbers, but that's why you load up on all these guys with a lot of potential in the minor leagues, so that one of those guys hopefully pops off for you in the major leagues. And we'll see if that's going to be Dominic Canzone or Ryan Bliss. Bliss very well could be a long-term second baseman for the Mariners. Also on the bench, you have Dylan Moore at the super utility. You got Jose Caballero, who could be an infield utility guy, or he could be, a AAA polishing his bat. Then you also have Mike Ford that can be there off of the bench in case you need him to come in and hit a nuke off the Hit It Here Cafe. And then again, we'll see when Harry Ford comes up and makes an impact. And then the way too early 2024 pitching rotation, you've got Luis Castillo, then Blake Snell or Sonny Gray or Jordan Montgomery, one of those guys, or Aaron Nola, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, and then who's ever left over from Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, or Emerson Hancock. You also have Robbie Ray coming back mid-year, as well as Marco Gonzalez at some point. Thank you for watching. That's what I got for this year. We'll see what the Mariners actually go out and do. It'll be an exciting offseason no matter what. The day the World Series ends is the day that the hot stove will fire up. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below on who you think the Mariners should sign in free agency, who the Mariners should trade away, who should they trade for, and let me know what your ideal lineup looks like for the Mariners on opening day in 2024. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.